Welcome to Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace. It's quite surprising that we are meeting again so quickly. I thought that there would be at least a week for us to simmer down and take in some of the things that I shared on my last video post. Obviously what's brought us here right now are new developments in regards to the Kwesi Dakwa case and the fact that the young lady has now dropped charges. There's been a lot of speculation around why that's happened. There have been people have made comments about the fact that this lady has been paid off. There's been hints that she was lying. There's all sorts of stories going on, and I think this is the disadvantage when a process is initiated but is not completed. It started off with an expectation, but then has come, in all intents and purposes, to a predictable conclusion. Now, when you look at some of the things I'd shared in my previous posts, and my saying that I was concerned that there was so much out there in the public domain, these were some of the reasons why. I am not at all surprised that the charges have been dropped, but not for the reasons that some people have stated, that oh, the person, you know, the young lady, you know, was lying and she couldn't go through with it anymore. You'll find, and I was hoping to get some statistical information for you in regards to how many cases within the United Kingdom are dropped for reasons surrounding the fact that the alleged rape victims don't feel that they have enough support to be able to go through a trial. It is very harrowing, and it's a lot of emotional pressure, even for a woman that has been violated, much less you know, a young girl. So it's not, for me, it's not something that raises eyebrows in any way, shape or form. Now, there has been a letter of apology, a public statement that's been put out there by Kwesi Dakwa, saying that, you know, he hopes that God will forgive him, you know, for his sins, and that he's really sorry, and that that we should pray for him. But even that apology in itself was quite controversial, because if you really look at the wording, you know, for me it's kind of like there is a message in between the lines. And what does he mean about us? Because they're not together, they're not in this together. This is a situation that initially people were quite emphatic of the fact that this was being done for money, that this girl was doing it because she had sinister reasons as to why she was accusing Kwesi Dakwa of rape. And looking at the letter, the tone of the letter, for me, didn't sound as somebody who is at all, you know, angry at the fact that they've been wrongly accused, reputation in tatters, being kept away from his friends and family for, I don't know how long it's been, about three or so weeks. It was an interesting, you know, letter. But it brings me to my point, and it kind of put things in perspective for me when I made reference to Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in 1993, and I'll tell you what the connection is for me in regards to this. I've had a couple of people who have stated, some clearly, some not so clearly, as to why I am using this Kwesi Dakwa to bring awareness about rape, because rape has always been there. Of course it has. But my reason is that looking at the responses, because this is a cause célèbre, it's a case that has now become known over the whole of Ghana, because of the person at the centre of it, because of who is involved. It's causing us to respond in different ways and ask so many questions. So for me, it's common sense, as far as I'm concerned, that we would use a case like this to raise awareness and to look at what went right, if anything, and what went wrong in regards to how this case was handled and how it's ended. And I did mention this in my previous post, and I think for those people that are, you know, I've got a new internet troll, so I do feel quite special. But for this silly woman that, or girl, I don't really know who she is, that was making comments of, why are you talking about rape? We've always known about rape. The fact is, in what context have we known about rape? I've made my views explicitly clear, not just my views, because before I get on here and speak about anything, I've spoken to a number of people and gotten a number of people's views to be able to come to a conclusion, or to at least challenge what it is that I'm being told. Now, making the statement that why do we need to use, or why do I need to use this case, I will tell you why. Because there are so many elements of it that should have been done differently. There's so many things surrounding it that have caused so much upset and pain and distress to both Kwesi Chedakwa and the victim or alleged victim. Because at the end of the day, for one, why did we have so much information available to us regarding this case? Look at the issue with the CCTV, for example. That CCTV, if this was this country, or if this was in America, or any other country where they have more robust, you know, laws and policies and procedures around how these things are done, that video would have been evidence. And I can guarantee you, you and I would not have seen it before a trial had begun. We would never have been privy to it. I don't think we would even have been privy to it afterwards, but that's a debatable point. But most certainly we would not have had access to it before the trial had begun. Then you also have the fact that medical records were leaked. In this country, even my husband does not have a right to my medical records. The only person, even if I put in a claim for insurance, my health insurance company have to have my permission before they can access my health records. That is how precious and confidential those records are. But in this case, in a case so sensitive like rape, it was open season for everybody. And then we wonder why the person dropped the case. If it were you or I, would you have had the liver to go through being scrutinized, people that you don't know judging you, casting aspersions? Could you have stood that? I know I couldn't. And that's why even in this country and other countries all over the world, it is difficult sometimes to get people who have been victims of abuse to come forward, much less agree to go to trial. The difference in this country is it's not dependent on whether you wish to press charges. If there is enough evidence to show that a crime has been committed, then those charges will proceed. And you would be called as a witness in your own case, so to speak. You could not make a decision on your own to say, sorry, I don't want to do this anymore. And the laws in this country were changed in regards to domestic violence in that area because many a time the women were too afraid to press charges against partners or, you know, or husbands or boyfriends. So they would call the police, you know, get their medical attention, patch up their bruises, and then the next thing, I'm dropping the charges. But the law was changed so that other women, after that relationship had ended, would not be victims of domestic violence because a previous partner didn't want to press charges. Now, I said I wanted to make some correlation between what has happened with the Kwesi Chedakwa case and the Stephen Lawrence case. Now, I don't have my usual, you know, my iPad and stuff around because battery died basically. And what I read, and forgive me if any of the finer details are not correct, so I'm, you know, putting that disclaimer there from now. But essentially, when Stephen Lawrence, let me put it this way. Stephen Lawrence was a young black boy living in the United Kingdom in Eltham. Young black boy from a decent home, decent family. He was studying. He didn't fit the stereotypical black boy of having his trousers down here, I don't know, possibly having a criminal record, known to the police, bad attitude. Stephen Lawrence did not fit that stereotype. So therefore, when Stephen Lawrence was murdered by, I think, 4 or 5 white boys in Eltham, they murdered him in cold blood. He was waiting at a bus stop to go home or wherever it was with a friend of his. They murdered him. When the police investigated this case, and I use the term investigate very loosely, when they investigated this case, because they were so racist and the life of a black boy meant absolutely nothing, and the protection of the white perpetrators were all that they were concerned about, nobody was called to task for the Stephen Lawrence murder. There was so much evidence that showed that these boys were guilty. I mean, apart from everything, there was a witness there, but there was so much evidence to show that these boys were guilty. They were not convicted. But, and very interesting, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday that was saying that nothing really needs to be done in terms of looking at laws and what have you if there hasn't been a conviction. And that's my frustration, that people are still looking at this as KKD victim. It's wider than that. We need to look at our laws as a whole. Because the sensible thing that came out of the Stephen Lawrence situation is they recognised and they appreciated, they accepted that the system had failed on so many levels. It became apparent as a result of that case that the police, there was institutional racism within the police force. You couldn't run away from that. And therefore, certain investigations had to take place. I mean, the police were so bad that there was actually an undercover police officer that tried to dish dirt on the Lawrence family, but God so good, they couldn't find anything. So there was nothing that they could use to cast any aspersion onto Stephen Lawrence's, character and tarnish his memory. So as a result of all those things, the other thing that was also looked at was the double jeopardy law, i.e. not being able to be tried for the same crime twice. They had to relook at that because these boys, I think they were tried, they were not convicted. But again, like I said, I don't have the exact finer details. What I do know is they were not convicted initially when this came about. But because of the tireless lobbying by Stephen Lawrence's parents, raising awareness, making their voices heard, like how I want our voices to be heard, of how we treat our young people in our society, the laws were changed in regards to how even racism is defined in the United Kingdom. The definition, a summary of the definition of how racism is defined in the United Kingdom is that racism is deemed to have taken place if the person who who feels that they have had racism, that they have been a subject of racism, they no longer have the burden of proof to prove that they have been a victim, but the burden of proof shifts from them to who is being accused. That came about because of the Stephen Lawrence case. The other thing that came out of the Stephen Lawrence case is how the police investigate these kind of racially motivated crimes. So many things were altered, so many things were changed. Because the double jeopardy law was looked at, those boys who had now become men, because I'm talking a period of 20 years, they were then brought to trial and they paid for taking the life of a young black boy with such promise. Stephen Lawrence was lucky that he wasn't a black boy from a council estate down the road, from a single parent family where the house may have been, I don't know, raided for drugs or anything of that nature. Because if there had been one blemish on the character of Stephen Lawrence, justice never would have been served. And the laws that I can, or rather my son being a young black boy, the laws that Omar can rely on to protect him to some degree would never have been put in place if people didn't stand up and say, hold on, certain things need to be re-looked at in this situation. So let's go back to Ghana. Let's go back to this case of Kwesi Dakwa and this young girl. The fact is, guilty or innocent, we need to look at the laws that protect such people. We need to look at the laws that protect victims of rape and abuse. We need to look at protecting the identity of alleged perpetrators. What if it was a false accusation? Your reputation is in tatters because we all know your name. We need to look at how much media involvement is permitted in regards to sensitive cases such as this. We need to look at the definition of rape within our society. We need to look at bringing and raising awareness of the value that we place on our bodies. And this has to be taught from the ground up. You remember in my previous post, I made references to the fact that we have a performance and reward system. And that's taken into the sexual arena. And that's just how we operate. So I think for me, it's really sad that this has ended in this way. But it's been so predictable that if I had placed a bet, I probably would be a millionaire by now. Because my whole point of this is, we needed to have handled this far better than we did. Because maybe then justice could have been served for Kwesi Dakwa to have been able to go through a process to clear his name, because the accuser would have had the vim to be able to have stood her ground, or looking at justice for the victim. We weren't kind. We showed no mercy. We showed no mercy. And I think we need to look at that as a society. Tomorrow there may be a rape. It might be your daughter. It might be your mother. It could be your sister. Would they have the heart to go through a rape trial in Ghana? I wouldn't. And all I'm saying is, and why I draw parallels is because, are we saying the life of the European woman, or the life of the American woman, the life of the Spanish woman, is her dignity, is it of more value than the African woman? Because as I sit here, God forbid I am met with such a situation, I know that my dignity would be protected. I know that you would not know who I am. I would be able to keep my dignity. And all I'm saying is, when we're so quick to just dismiss this case, oh well, now it's over. No, for me, I would say the fight really begins. Now is the time that we need to go back to the drawing board and take the emotions out of this and say, I have a child, I have a daughter. If this were my daughter, how does the law currently protect her? And I think that's really the point of all of this. At the end of the day, is the life of the African child, the African woman, not as valuable as the life of the European woman? Now, I don't know if we will ever have to come back and revisit this topic ever again. And I think we will, but maybe in different capacities. But on another note, I am going to be talking about, again, a male-female situation, but in the area of relationship. So the next thing that will be out for you to see on Sunday will be, just ask yourself this question before then. If you have a friend and you see your friend's husband or your friend's wife out with somebody that they shouldn't be with, because you can clearly see that there is some kind of relationship going on between them, would you go back and tell your friend? It's going to be really interesting. I do have a guest that I will be speaking to about this topic. And thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. In the meantime, do share the video. Don't keep it to yourself. Come visit us on the fan page. We're going to have more discussions. I want to thank everybody for your contributions so far. I would like to say that I don't want to receive private messages on the fan page. It's an open discussion. It's a respectful discussion. Everybody's point of view is respected. So there's no need to have any fear of airing your views. So I just want to thank you for all the support that I've had in this very, very short space of time. And thank you.